gross, there's something on my shirt. Sorry, everyone.
You can sign to me.
Lizzy, I got you.
That's right.
Thank you.
I can't hear.
Okay, so today we are going to talk about the Nuremberg trials. Remember that we look at the Nuremberg trials as a milestone in interpreting. Not ASL English interpreting, but spoken language interpreting. So big changes happened in the world of interpreting at the Nuremberg trials. So first, let's go to prior to World War I. So prior to World War I, in 1919, we had the Paris Peace Conference. That's World War I. The world starts coming together as a global community. We don't all share the same language, but we're interacting with each other. We were fighting a war, there's allies, there's foes. When we decide to come together for peace and to sign a peace treaty, that conference, the only official language recognized was French. So French diplomats who might have known a second language, they were the ones who were being used as interpreters at the time. There also were no spoken language programs out there to learn interpreting. So these were ad hoc individuals who were performing the task of interpretation. They had to know French and possibly another language. Also, during the conferences, while people were speaking, they did a lot of what they called dispatch interpreting. So they would translate things into a written English or a written German or whatever other language the target language was, write down a summary of what was being spoken and hand it to someone that way. That's how interpreting started. Paris Peace Conference. At the Paris Peace Conference, actually in 1919, I said this wrong first, let me go back. Prior to the Paris Peace Conference, French was the only official language for world conferences. At the Paris Peace Conference is when English was finally recognized as an official language. So now in international conferences, two languages were being used, French and English. They were the two official languages. Because of that, 1919 Paris Peace Conference is known as the time when the professional spoken language interpreter or interpreting profession began. Because now we had more than one official language, hence the need for spoken language interpreters into the two official languages. 1931, the League of Nations was founded because they recognized the need for spoken language interpreters. After Paris Peace Conference in 1931, League of Nations, now all of a sudden we start seeing interpreting schools popping up all over Europe. Because again, we're becoming a global society. So the world is coming together with all of these different languages, with all of these variables, and everybody needed to find a way to communicate with each other. So in order to do that, we needed to train conference interpreters. But even in 1931, conference interpreters were still only working in a consecutive mode. It was not simultaneous as it is now. You think the speaker keeps speaking and the interpreter keeps interpreting and there's lag time and we don't pause at the same time, we don't end our sentences at the same time. That's simultaneous. That's what we use today, both spoken language interpreters and ASL English interpreters. But in the past, Paris Peace Conference, League of Nations, it was always consecutive interpreting. So, the invention of simultaneous interpreting didn't happen until towards the end of the 1930s. At this time, a new system was invented. It was called the Hushaphone system, actually the IBM Hushaphone. It was invented by Filene and Finley, and it was patented actually in 1926. But the first installment of this Hushaphone system didn't happen until 1931 when it was installed at the League of Nations. At that time, it was a permanent installation. It had individual booths for interpreters, headphones, a wired system in order to give an interpretation to all participants at these national and international conferences. So Filene and Finley are credited with the equipment that allowed for a simultaneous interpretation. But 1926 it was patented, 1931 it was installed at the League of Nations, but still this equipment was only used in a consecutive fashion. It was not being used in a simultaneous fashion until the birth of simultaneous interpreting, which took place at the Nuremberg trials. So now picture this. We're back in 1931, we're at the League of Nations. Most of the time, the interpreting is done consecutively before the hushaphone system. Let's say I'm a French speaker and I'm going to present my paper on irrigation systems to help the world farmers, and I only speak French. In the audience are a variety of delegates and representatives from every country around the world, so a ton of other languages. I stand up, I give my presentation in French. It may take 40 minutes, 45 minutes, an hour. I give my entire presentation. Everybody in the audience just sits. If you speak French, then you can pay attention to me because I'm speaking French. If you speak another language, you sit for 45 minutes and wait until I'm done. When I'm done, then maybe a Russian interpreter comes up and will recreate my speech in Russian while everybody sits and listens. So if you speak Polish, you may have to wait 5 hours until they get to the Polish interpretation of what my original French source language was. They call that consecutive interpreting. Once the hushaphone, the Filene-Finley hushaphone system was installed at the League of Nations, they began doing something called simultaneous successive interpreting. Again, it wasn't full simultaneous. It wasn't done fully at the same time. I'm the French speaker. I give my entire presentation in French, but now all of the interpreters in the hushaphone booths are taking notes into their target language. When my presentation is over, everybody in the audience grabs the headphones for the language they need, and all the interpreters render their interpretation at the same time. It's consecutive to the source, but all of the languages are simultaneous. Does that make sense? Okay, good. So that's what happened prior to Nuremberg. Now, at the Nuremberg trials, first you need to know that the Nuremberg